Hey, Willow Park Church Downtown, thank you so much for coming to watch this sermon. At Willow Park Church, we are one church in 3 locations, and our vision is to see lives transformed by Jesus Christ in the Okanagan Valley. If you want any more information about anything that we do downtown or any of our other locations, then please go to our website, willowparkchurch.com. In the meantime, it's our prayer that this message will build you up, point you to Jesus, that your love for Him will deepen. Thank you so much again for joining us, and God bless.
Man, if you thought the feeding of the 5,000 was amazing, wait till you get to the feeding of the 4,000, okay? This is going to be a lot of fun, in part because we get to do a little history together today. We'll try not to get lost in it. I know I can get a little convoluted, but we're going to delve into some of the precepts, the tenets of our modern society, and then we're going to work through them with what we see Jesus doing here. So today's sermon is entitled Enlightenment, Bread, and Gratitude. We're going to be going through some major themes. I'm going to put them up ahead of time so we can keep track of them. We're going to be looking at devotion, doubt, and expectations. We're going to be looking at what it means to have gratitude in our lives and what it also looks like to be satisfied. These 4 things come up prominently in our passage today. And as Phil mentioned a few weeks ago, the setting here is Jesus is in and about the Gentile regions. He's not in the Jewish area. He's out amongst the diaspora, or people that maybe have heard of Jesus and want to know more. So let's jump right in. We begin with another large crowd. Jesus' popularity has only grown more and more, and he's outside of the towns because there's just too many people, so he has to be in the wilderness, out in the wild space, the desolate lands. That's where Jesus is setting up camp and preaching and teaching and healing. Now, this is one of those things that maybe a word we don't use very often, but the crowd is devoted to Jesus. They are desperate to see him. We don't use that word devotion a lot, unless you're, going to a Taylor Swift concert. Devotion is something that we often kind of leave out of our everyday talk. It kind of feels like an old word, something people used to do. But devotion, I'm going to tell you, is still alive and around today. So devotion as a definition is going beyond what is reasonable. Devotion is going beyond what is a reasonable amount of love. Now, this is a picture of people who I don't know going to the midnight showing of Lord of the Rings, Return of the King. And when I found this picture, I was like, yes, this is a beautiful picture of devotion. So when I was in high school, Return of the King came out. I was in grade 12. Me and my friends sat down. We watched the other 2 full versions, the director's cut of the movie, before going to see this. We had to line up days in advance. Well, not quite days. That's a little bit of an exaggeration. We had to line up to get our ticket weeks before. So we had to line up for hours to do that. And then when the night of the movie came out, midnight, we had to get in line at around 7 p.m. for the midnight showing so we would get a good seat. Because you didn't reserve seats in these theaters. It was first come into the theater, first serve. So if you wanted to not only get your ticket, but also not sit at the very front, you had to get there hours ahead of time. And my friends and I were devoted to this story, this movie. We went beyond what was reasonable to do for just watching a movie, especially if you bought your ticket for the next day and you could just go and it was a lot easier. So devotion kind of brings up this kind of intensity, and it leads to conflict. Maybe even it leads to misery. Especially when you have a 12-year-old boy tell you, Lord of the Rings, that's boring. Okay? Now there's a problem. Devotion has intensity to it. It has direction to it, and it's associated with conflict. And for those of us who are maybe conflict averse, that sounds miserable. So devotion is this word that we don't really use very much. It's still active in our world, but, we know that it comes with some problems. The crowd also had problems. They were desperate to see Jesus. They wanted to hear from him. They went out to the wilderness without a plan. They went out there without food. They went out there without tents. They went out there just to be there with him, and probably weren't expecting to be there for 3 days. Their devotion meant that they weren't ready for the situation they were in. So that's where we get this idea of devotion kind of puts on blinders. It focuses us so that we don't pay attention to what's going on, or we miss the details. Now, we all have different expectations of readiness in our lives. Jenny and I pack for camping very differently. Jenny packs very efficiently and with a lot of redundancy, if you can read between the lines. Where I feel like you have fireside clothes and you have hiking clothes, and that's what you need. And you need one pair of each, and you're good. There are different standards of what readiness is. This crowd was not ready for what they did. They went out there blindly, devotedly, and now they're in a problem. This conundrum isn't going to be solved by them, as we'll see later on. But, I'm not the only person that has noticed that devotion gets us into conundrums. Now, this is where our little bit of history comes in, okay? This is where we go a little bit back. We're going to go back to an era called the Enlightenment. Now, if you grew up in Western culture, you know what this is. If you haven't, I'm going to just briefly give you a flyover of what that means. In the 1600s, the 1700s, there were groups of people that kind of got sick of all the fighting that was going on in Europe. There was lots of wars happening, and a lot of these wars seemed to be religiously motivated. Well, we're having all these fights between Catholics and Protestants, and we're all okay with beating up on Anabaptists. That's not a problem. The issue, though, is that everybody's ending up miserable. All this taxation is happening. All these things are social problems are happening because we keep sending people out to war. In France and England, a classic example is their 100 Years' War. Okay, can you imagine being at war for 100 years? That's a long war. So it's pretty reasonable that people got sick of this. So in the Enlightenment is this time where people say, well, how do we get away from this? We need to maybe stop all this religious devotion. Okay? Maybe religion is the problem. And instead of religion, we need to do something else. And so they went towards towards reason. If everybody was just reasonable, then everything would be fine. So the 4 kind of basic tenets of the Enlightenment, and you'll see them in our own society, is this. First, all questions have answers. All questions have answers. All answers coalesce. They work together. They don't contradict each other. They can all be discovered through reason. And lastly, that will make for a happier society. So those 4 things, I should have had a slide up for you. I apologize, but those 4 things, and you'll kind of see these things come up even now today. So this is like the basis of modern atheistic philosophy, okay? All questions have answers. All answers work together. They can all be discovered through reason, and this will make you happier. Well, happiness becomes the goal of life. Devotion gets kicked out the door. Well, this is one of those things that the heart of today's sermon is going to be about, is that we live in a culture that is disproportionate. We'll put it that way. We live in a culture that's disproportionate. It elevates one thing above another. It denies something else. So what we end up with is kind of a starve and feast culture. So like with the Enlightenment, these thinkers, they're like, we're going to be all in on reason. And what happened is they lost sense of feeling. This is where you get things like vivisection, the dissecting of animals while they're still alive. You have these people that are unfeeling, uncompassionate. They have sunk their emotions down because reason is the only guide to truth. And so we live in that cultural earthquake still today, where we're either all in on socialism or we're all out on, tradition. We're kind of an all or nothing culture, up and down. And so everything's kind of out of proportion. And I'm going to propose today that Jesus is the one who brings all these things in together. He brings all our values and virtues and puts them into proper relationship and proper proportion, which is what we need. We don't need a life of extremes. We need a life of proper proportion. This is very clear that devotion is still active today. So we have a kind of cultural movement that tries to get rid of devotion. Doesn't work. It's still around. Still causes some conundrums. Oh, my clicker. We end up in this place of problems, and then what do we do with it? Well, Jesus sees a problem, and he has compassion. Now, that word isn't just a nice feeling word. Jesus is like, sorry, buddies. You didn't pack your lunch. We'll figure that out for you, like a good day camp leader. No, this compassion is the compassion of a parent seeing a child in danger or duress. One of those stark moments in my own life happened to my son, Isaac. They were jumping on the trampoline, him and his brothers, and then I think Noah runs up, Dad, Isaac's hurt. Okay, I've heard this 1,000 times. Maybe my compassion wasn't right there. Okay, yeah, I'll come out and check on him. I come out, Isaac is dangling upside down with his legs stuck in the springs, off of the trampoline. And all of a sudden, I'm like, oh no. My heart, my guts retch into action. I jump down the stairs, run over and haul him out of there and rescue him from this trampoline death trap that we gave them. That feeling still sticks with me, and that's the feeling that Jesus is conveying with these words. It doesn't leap off the page necessarily when you read it in English, but if you were to read this in Greek, you'd see that Jesus is looking at these people and going, oh no, they're in trouble. We have to help them. And he asks the disciples, he calls them over, what can we do? And the disciples had a bit of a Nick reaction. Okay, we'll dawdle all over there and we'll figure this out. And their solution is, there's not enough bread. There you go, just send them back. It's gonna be fine, Jesus, don't worry about it. Their mentality is surprising because we, just a couple of chapters ago, had the feeding of the 5,000. That was more people. And if you remember it being explained back when Glenn preached it and saying that, it's 5,000 men, there's probably families involved in this. It's probably a lot more people than what that number signifies to us. It's probably somewhere between 8,000 to 10,000, maybe even more than that. Who knows? Same thing here. Same situation, same setup, and the disciples' mentality is, what are you going to do? Not enough bread. What were they thinking? Well, I think that there is some precedence for this kind of mentality, and I think we kind of share it sometimes. Now, in the OT, miracles kind of come across as one and done. So you have Elijah and Elisha. These are the great miracle workers of the Old Testament. They are ones who have stories of feeding people, kind of like what Jesus did. And they're kind of just like one and done stories. Like God said, yes, this one time I got my miracle. Thank you. And I won't expect another. Now that is not a correct understanding of the Old Testament. I just want to make that very clear. But that one and done mentality, I think, is something that we kind of bring to the table. We bring our expectations and our doubts to this table of what God can do or can't do or won't do. And this way of thinking doesn't just stay inside of us. We end up with a view of God that is stingy. A God who says yes, but just enough, or just this one time. And then that puts us in this place where we're actually deciding for God what he is or isn't going to do. It puts us in a position of prediction. We have this posture of prediction of what is possible. And it means then that when we talk to our kids or our friends or our neighbors or those around us, we bring our own boundaries of what we think God can do for that person. And that shapes how we respond to them. That's one of the reasons why we do offering and we give financially, is because we need to be reminded over and over and over again that we have a generous God. I can take this percentage or number of money and I can give it to the church, even though I have things that I would rather spend it on, even though I have other priorities. I'm going to take it and I'm going to give it because I know God's generous. I know he's going to be generous with me, and I want to be generous with others. I want to be like God. That's why we give. But when you start kind of having this scarcity mindset, well, I'm only going to get one miracle. God's going to only do something nice for me 2 or 3 times in my life. You start to hedge your bets. You start to be controlling. You start to have doubts. You start to expect less and less and less. And that hurts. That hurts us. That hurts you. That hurts those around you. And that's why we go and we look next at what Jesus did. He doesn't have a posture of prediction. Instead, he gathers the crowd. He takes the loaves and he gives thanks. Gratitude. Thank you. Before anything has happened, Jesus says, thank you. Gratitude is identifying the cause of your good state. It's I'm here because of you. Gratitude is not getting something and then saying thank you. Now, we've ended up in a place in our own culture where, we put gratitude in the context of presents and things like that. Give me my present and then I'll say thank you. Now, I'm not trying to change how we be polite in society. I'm not saying that. But the example here is not of that. Jesus isn't getting something already. He's saying, thank you first. Because gratitude is not about the things you get. It's about the source of your life and security, your values, and your feeling of worth. You know, this is where I think sometimes marriage comes into play a little bit. You know, in married life, there's a lot of balancing that happens between the chores and the work and all these different things that we have to do in order to keep a household running. And in the midst of all this work, you're also trying to maintain your love and affection for your spouse. And so we sometimes get into a cycle of doing things for our partner and then expecting gratitude. Well, I did this, this, and this for you. Why didn't you do more for me? Or why didn't you show me appreciation? And, you know, marriage, that can be a hard place to be once you start trying to total your numbers. Because you can spend a lot of time trying to figure out who's made it further along the line of doing things for the other person. And everybody has their different numbers. And every time it comes up, it's one of those things that we have to remind ourselves, it's not a numbers thing. We're not trying to count what we do for each other in order to prove or receive gratitude. Marriage and your marriage with your partner is about source. It's about where it comes from, not about what you're getting. And so that's the mistake we make in marriage, is we think that we're doing something for them. And look, I did this. You should be grateful for this. But gratitude isn't about the this. It's about the source. And in a partnership like marriage, the kind of things that come out of that should be a sense of security, a sense of purpose, a sense of value. When we look to our partner, we have to remind ourselves that we're supposed to be rooting ourselves in this relationship and finding our identity and purpose. When Adam sees Eve, he says, "This is bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh." That is not a utility language. That's somebody that's going to carry the haystack for me. Okay? That's the person who's going to pick all the apples off that tree. Oh, maybe not that tree. Okay? This is not about what you do and all the little bits that you've accomplished for me. This is language of identity, of purpose, value, security. So when we talk about gratitude, we have to make sure we're keeping our mind away from the things metaphor and putting it back onto the source. That this is out of this comes blessing and goodness and the situation of my life. So when Jesus says thank you, he says thank you ahead of time. He is identifying the Father as the source. This is where it comes from. This is blessing. Woo, almost lost it. Now, gratitude's been studied a lot. Phil, in his sermon, which I did watch, so, watched Phil preached this sermon last week. I watched it, and it was amazing. I totally recommend it. In it, he said that there's over 140 scientific social studies on gratitude, and the benefits are overwhelming. Gratitude, basically across the board, good thing, get it in your life. So you don't have to read those 140 studies. You just know that gratitude is really good for you. It has health benefits, it has relational benefits, it has work benefits, it has all sorts of things tied into it, which is pretty obvious, I would think. However, in those 140, studies, they don't give you a foundation for why you should be grateful. A scientific study limits itself to the evidence that it can observe, not the reasons or structure behind it. And so you might come out of this and say, I just need to be grateful, so I'm going to force myself to be grateful in every situation. That sounds delusional. It's delusional. I went and did a CPR course many years ago, and we had a course instructor who started the lessons by saying, if you want to revolutionize your life, he preached to us, you need to be grateful in all situations. Okay, that's great. Why are you grateful? Well, you just need to be. Okay, that was the extent of the sermon. Do it. Be grateful in all situations. We do this class, and then at the end, we have to do the test. And I got voted going first, which was the worst. And I do all the little CPR stuff, and then he says, great job. That's amazing. I'm so thankful that you tried. Back of the line. I had failed. I stood there dumbfounded because I didn't know if I had failed. Because why am I going to the back of the line? I have to do this again? He framed my failure to keep someone alive in a really positive way. And you can live this way. It may be. I'm not convinced. He was convinced. You can end up looking like Kevin trying to eat broccoli and say that he likes it. But I'm guessing that that's not going to work out for a lot of us. Gratitude can't come from a place of forced or delusional perspective. You need to have a grounding to your gratitude, a reason why you can be grateful. One of my favorite theologians, G.K. Chesterton, says this: when it comes to life, the critical thing is whether you take things for granted or take them with gratitude. I would maintain that thanks are the highest form of thought, and that gratitude is happiness doubled by wonder. The worst moment for an atheist is when he is really thankful and has no one to thank. G.K. Chesterton was basically a journalist, a news article writer. He wrote so many things, it's hard to classify. But he was a champion against this kind of Enlightenment thought that said reason was enough, reason has the answers, and reason will make you happy. And here he comes down with a strike against that I think is just so critical, because gratitude is essential to happiness. And if the Enlightenment project was built around happiness, it could never achieve gratitude except in a delusional sense. Then what was it for? How was it going to work? And there's a reason why we've left a lot of that behind as a culture. It still comes up, still creeps its way in. But let's make sure that we don't go back, but still pursue a life of good proportions. One where gratitude is a litmus test. A litmus test is that kind of little strip you put in a chemical or whatever. Maybe you've done this with a pool. Put it in and it shows you where all the chemicals are in your pool, and they're proportional. They're proportionate space to each other. How much of them is in there? And the litmus test reveals whether things are in good proportion or in bad proportion. Last year, we tried to fill our pool. It didn't go well. Filled it, water's crystal clear, put the chlorine in. instantly turns orange. Some of you know why, and some of you don't. I didn't. I thought that maybe the water is really bad. I'll try to treat it more. So I tried to treat the water more to get balance. I put the litmus test in, and everything was in proportion, except that I didn't have the right test. The water had been contaminated with metal through our hose. So every time I chlorinated it, the chlorine would react with the metals in the water and turn it orange. If you want the right test in your life, don't make happiness the test. Because you have so much entertainment. You have so many things. You live in a wealthy, rich country. I know sometimes it doesn't always feel like that. We are very, very privileged. If you make happiness the test of what your life is and how things are proportioned, you're going to end up with an orange pool, one that's not safe or good to swim in. Instead, we need to look to gratitude. Are you grateful? How often does gratefulness come up in your life? The people ate and were satisfied. I want to sit there for a little bit. Satisfaction is really hard to find. It's hard to find. It's easy to find too much. Go to an all-you-can-eat buffet. You won't come out of there satisfied. You'll come out of there stuffed. And it's really easy to find ways of depriving yourself too. You can say no to so many things. Some of us, not all of us, some of us find it easy to say no to things. Now, I personally have a way easier time cutting things out of my schedule than I do adding things in. So let's say like for diet and exercise, man, I have to add exercise into my life. I find that way harder to do. But if I have to cut something from my diet, I can do that a lot easier. And that's a evidence of kind of the disproportion in my own life and in our lives where, we can add things in. Some of us are adders. I'm going to add more and more and more and more. Some of us are good at cutting things. I'm going to cut this out, that out, that out. But in the end, we still all get into this dysfunction. This dysfunction of not being able to balance the parts of life and reach a point of satisfaction. I used to watch this show, Scrubs, and it was a really funny show. And this one character in it, he's gaining weight. He's not happy about it. And then he sees this older guy, he's in his 50s, fit as a fiddle. And he asks him, how do you do this? And so he follows this guy and does his training, and he does all this stuff. He starts feeling better. And he asks the 50-year-old guy, man, when do you start feeling, you must love your body and feel good about this? He says, no. The reason I do this is because I hate my body, and my hate fuels my exercise. And that's what gives me purpose and direction in this. And it's like, oh my goodness. You see the other character realize I don't want to live like that. It wasn't satisfaction that he was achieving. He was just driven by dissatisfaction. How much better would it be if our lives were driven by satisfaction instead of dissatisfaction? Dissatisfaction that moves us towards looking for other things, other people, other jobs, other opportunities, always looking out, not able to enjoy what we have. Satisfaction is hard to find. If our goal is to be satisfied and grateful, that means we need to find correct proportions in our life. And friends, Jesus is the one where we can anchor for that. Jesus, over and over and over again, shows us what an out-of-control situation looks like and how he brings compassion into that moment, how he brings truth, how he brings presence. I'm not going to get it right. You're not going to get it right. But if we need somebody to give us an anchoring point, who better than Jesus? Jesus pulls devotion, something that gets us into trouble sometimes. He pulls reason and doubt, expectations, hope, and gratitude into relationship together, and he puts them into the right context, the right shape, the right proportion, and he calls you to follow. When the band played that song and it was asking Jesus to shape things, to shape your heart, that's what he wants to do. Jesus wants you to bring your life to him. And your life is out of shape. It's got some things right and it's got some things wrong. It's got some things that are too big here and too small there. Each one of us has a life that is misshapen in some way or another. And Jesus doesn't say, get rid of it, get out there, figure it out yourself, move on, there's not enough bread here. Instead, he asks, let me have it. Let me be thankful. And let's find satisfaction. And if you're ready to take a next step and you are ready to give Jesus your life, or maybe you're ready to give Jesus more of your life, don't do it alone. Join in. Jesus didn't found the church because he wanted Christians to figure it out themselves. We're supposed to do this together. So if you want to take a next step, if you want to see something in your life change, you want to experience transformation, let's do it together. We'll be starting off our community group, seasonal groups in September. That's a great time to join in. We also do Alpha. We have all these meals that are coming up. There are ways to plug in and be a part of this. And I know that it can be a little scary sometimes, a little hard to join into a community, but can I say that God's plan for you is to be a part of this? So, join in, jump in, fill out a Connect card, get the newsletter signed up, ask us what you can join in and do, because we want to do this together. And I believe that we will find satisfaction in that. I'll call the band up here and we'll pray. Father, we thank you so much that you are our source of life, that you are the one who gives us bread, not just physical bread, but spiritual bread that nourishes our souls. And I pray that each and every one of us would walk away today knowing that Jesus has compassion for us. He sees us in trouble. He is running to us, calling to us, asking us to give our hearts. And Lord, if today there's people here that want to take that next step, I pray that you would give them the courage to do so. Courage to speak those words of commitment or recommitment. Courage to give you more of their lives, and the courage to reach out to this community. I thank you so much that you've blessed us, that you've given us so much. And I pray that we would go out and not be stingy with our view of you, Lord, but be ready to share it and to give it to others and to hope and pray for blessing on this city. Amen.